seeing that Josh Dobbs and Nick Mullins didn't perform any differently at all here than they did anywhere else, it's hard for me to point the finger at the head coach and say, you don't know what you're doing.
Sunday didn't go too well for Jaren Hall or Nick Mullins for that matter, and the last couple of weeks haven't gone too well for the Vikings quarterback situation. So I kind of want to ask you, how concerned should Vikings fans be about how Kevin O'Connell has handled this quarterback situation since Kirk Cousins' injury?
I guess I would say a little, but not a lot. Maybe even a very little, because what we know about the offense when Kirk Cousins was running it is that the Vikings were 7th in scoring from the time Kevin O'Connell took over to the time that Kirk Cousins' Achilles popped in Lambeau. That's pretty good. Since then, they're not 7th in scoring anymore. They've gotten much worse. But when you look at the quarterbacks that he's working with, we're not talking about even a Case Keenum level backup quarterback. We're talking about two guys that are barely hanging on in the league at Josh Dobbs and Nick Mullins, and another guy who is playing just for the very first time in his life in the NFL in Jaren Hall. And for a coach, there's only so much you can do. I mean, when you go back and look at the plays the other night, there were opportunities to throw the ball, and Jaren Hall just couldn't get it out because the NFL is really fast and really difficult, and the timing is such a big deal. So he needs much more time to practice, to go through another training camp, to develop, to get used to what he's seeing matching up with what he's doing physically. From Nick Mullins' perspective, he's always turned the ball over like crazy, and they actually did get 48 points out of those two games with Nick Mullins starting. And with Dobbs, eventually when opponents started to factor for his legs, it was a much more difficult run. I do think that when you look at the screen game for the Vikings, it has been really miserable, even when Kirk Cousins was the quarterback. But that's one thing that you can help out backup quarterbacks with quite a little bit of quick game. We saw even the Green Bay Packers getting some bubble screens that turned into 7, 8, 9 yard plays that the Vikings have not really used. They've tried to push the ball down the field, or they've tried to use downfield routes to clear out things underneath, and the quarterbacks have just not been able to find it. Or in Nick Mullins' case, they just went for the deep route every single time against the Detroit Lions. But seeing that Josh Dobbs and Nick Mullins didn't perform any differently at all here than they did anywhere else, it's hard for me to point the finger at the head coach and say, you don't know what you're doing. Now, I will say that they probably asked too much of Jaren Hall. Ty Chandler was running pretty well against the Packers, and there were a lot of opportunities on second and medium where they still pushed the pass button, despite how Jaren Hall looked as far as his confidence. And then at the end of the half, you're down 2 touchdowns and probably looking at changing quarterbacks, and you still say, all right, Jaren, go get him, drop back. And that's when he got strip sacked and essentially ended the game. So it's more of nitpicks than it is big picture. And if they draft a quarterback or if they go back to Kirk Cousins, does anyone think that they can't get Justin Jefferson open or get Jordan Addison open or get the football to TJ Hawkinson with a competent quarterback? Because the numbers would suggest they are very good at doing that, and that their passing scheme works when they have a quarterback who can execute it. So I do think that there's work to be done. There's self-analysis to be done. They have to figure out why they can't run the football, because we know Ty Chandler is talented. We know Alexander Madison's been better than this in the past, and he's not on the older side like Dalvin Cook was. So what is the cause here? Is it offensive line? Is it scheme? Is it play calling? Is it the timing? Because that's another thing that would have helped a lot for these backup quarterbacks, is if they could have leaned more on the run game. So there is an offseason to look back at everything that happened here and say, what do we have to improve on for the future? So it's not just all on the quarterback to push the ball downfield and create explosives to have success, but maybe more easy buttons within the offense. But as far as big picture concern, I don't really think it should be on the serious side, because most coaches, when they end up with a backup quarterback, this is kind of the results that they usually end up getting.
That's been another Purple Insider Extra for Bring Me the Sports. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the Purple Insider Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Talk to you next time.